Hello everyone, my name is Vesniki Mitsiopoulos, and this week I'll be walking us through topical data which answers our what questions. Topical visualizations aim to answer what questions through textual analysis. Data processing is used to determine topic distribution and topical changes over time in a text corpus. Before analyzing the text, one must prepare the data corpus or the set of text being used for the project through data pre-processing. The steps for data pre-processing include fielding, text selection, stemming and stop word removal, tokenization, normalization, descriptive term identification, and tagging. Let's take a deeper look into those. So fielding, most text is not semantically tagged in its metadata, so it needs to be fielded to determine what parts of the text represent what semantic content. In text selection, one needs to determine what parts of the text should be used in the study. Typically, abstracts and keywords are used. It is less likely to process a whole full text just because it's more cumbersome. Keywords are going to be the most obvious choice if processing the subjects of the text. Next is stemming and stop word removal. Stemming reduces common terms to their stems. So if we're trying to look for anything based in scientific research, one would stem the word scientific and scientifically and reduce that to their stem scientif with an asterisk. And then stop word removal excludes common dispensable words like the, a, at, etc. in order to make the text more streamlined. Tokenization breaks up text into words, phrases, symbols, and other meaningful elements. This needs to be determined by the person analyzing the text, which phrases or words are going to be most helpful in the analysis. So delimiters will separate the tokens. Example, if you are looking at the term science and technology, you can delimit that phrase into science, and technology. If you wanted to look and mine through the text for that phrase itself, you would combine it with quotation marks. You would do quote, science and technology, end quote. Another example is bibliographic coupling. That's one phrase, so you would want to search for those two words together using quotation marks rather than delimiting them. N-grams are a sequence of n terms determined as usual for text analysis. So you would determine what tokens you are looking for, and those would be your n terms. Normalization is used for text comparisons, often in text across years or in text of different lengths. So you would create those parameters. Descriptive term identification works off of the work of Gerard Salton's TF over IDF, which determines the originality of a word by comparing the number of times a word appears in a text with the number of texts the word appears in. So it's really taking a look at the originality of the term in the text corpus being analyzed. And finally, tagging, which is utilizing grammatical tagging for deeper linguistic analysis. So it's tagging the terms you're looking for based on parts of speech, grammar, and etc. Once our data has been prepared for text analysis, distributions are determined. The goal of topical studies is understanding topical distribution of text and its change over time. One thing you look for is term frequency, number of times a term is found in a text corpus, or the temporal dynamics, which is the change in term frequency over time. Now we're going to take a look at some common topical visualizations. These examples on this slide are for composition and frequency types of topical visualizations. Our first and kind of the most basic is a term frequency list, which is just pulling out the wanted terms out of a text corpus and listing their frequencies within the text and the location from which they came. This is a good basis to make more complex and insightful visualizations from, because using a list doesn't create that visualization for the user that would be most helpful. Next, which many of us are very familiar with, are tag clouds, which, based on the frequency of the term in the text, determines the size of the word within the tag cloud. There are also other versions of a tag cloud called collocate clouds, which group phrases within a text corpus and based on their frequency. Next would be any type of graph. Mainly bar graphs are used and line graphs because they need to show the frequency of the terms. This graph here, as an example, looks at the term influenza within the British Medical Journal from its publications from 1885 to 1899. And we can see its change through time based on its frequency within the journal. There was a spike in publications based about influenza in 1892. And then we can see its slight decrease, but it remains pretty steady after that. Other types of topical visualizations are the topical structures, so the way what data is presented within the text. An example is a circular graph, which takes a look at how the topics within a text are structured. So for example, this graph here takes a look at the topics within a textbook and the amount of that text they take up. The next type of topical visualization is an interesting one developed by digital librarians. It is called the Griddle, the Graphical Interface for Digital Libraries, which is a type of tabular reference system to plot text records. And this is a lot more interactive because subplots can be zoomed into and taken a look at a deeper scale. So the x-axis of a griddle usually takes some type of temporal or spatial properties, like time, authors, or larger subjects. And then the y-axis are the topic hierarchies. So you can see in this example, it's looking at different types of animals or organisms, and then their instances within larger science domains. And then those subplots can be zoomed into, and you'll see within them bar graphs of those terms. And finally, we'll take a look at a sentiment analysis, which was part of our Barrasso reading, which was an interesting type of visualization. And its goal is to process it's the process of computationally categorizing text based on the writer's attitude toward a topic. And this sentiment analysis took a look at social media and the way the author's sentiment about the topic they're writing. And a more positive score shows a positive sentiment, and a negative score shows a more negative. The topic that Barrasso had taken a look at showed a really high example of neutrality, but there were instances of more positive sentiment and negative sentiment for this topic. That is it for this week. Thank you very much for listening along, and everyone have a good week.